מזמור לדוד. אדוני רואי לא אחסר, בינו דשא ירביצני, על מי מנוחות ינהלני. נפשי ישובב, ינחני במגלי צדק, למען שמו. גם כי אלך בגיא צל מוות, לא אירא רע, כי אתה עמדי. שבטך ומשענתך המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צורריי, דישנת בשמן ראשי, כוסי רוויה. אך טוב וחסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים.
I'd like to recite a passage from Proverbs 31, selection from the Eshet Chayil. Certainly Bernice was truly an Eshet Chayil in many different ways. Eshet Chayil miyim sav rachok mipnini michra, batach balev balal v'shalal lo yechsar. Kapa parsala nivi adar shachal avion, oz v'hadar levusha v'tishchak liyom acharon, piha patcha v'chachma v'torah chesed ala shonah, sofi halichot beita v'lechem aslut lo tochel, kamuvaner v'yashrua bala v'halala, rabot banot asuchayo v'yat alit al kulana, sheker achen v'evelayofi isha yirat Adonai hiti talal, Junula mifriya deha v'halaluha basharim haseha. A good wife who can find her worth is far above rubies. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and nothing shall he lack. She renders him good and not evil all the days of her life. She opens her hand to the needy and extends her hand to the poor. She is robed in strength and dignity and cheerfully faces whatever may come. She opens her mouth with wisdom. Her tongue is guided by kindness. She tends to the affairs of her household and eats not the bread of idleness. Her children come forward and bless her. They praise her, saying, many women have done superbly, but you surpass them all. Charm may be deceitful and beauty may fade, but a God-revering woman is much to be praised. Place before her the fruit of her hands. Wherever people gather, her deeds shall speak her praise.
Ribono Shalom, Master of the universe, Creator of heaven, earth, man, and woman, be gracious to your children who now mourn. May the light of your presence dispel the gloom of absence so keenly felt on this sad day. Bless them with your compassion, empower them with your love, touch them with the fullness of your heart that they may be granted inner peace. El Shaddai, Almighty God of the living and the dead, send comfort to your children who now grieve. Overcome by the pain of loss, they need your help to focus on the triumph and on the joy in Bernice Cohen's life. Help them to meet grief with courage, to face sorrow undaunted. Help them to treasure what is now theirs because Bernice lived. Should despair threaten or faith falter, sustain us all, Adonai, for you are our refuge and our strength, our ever-present help in troubled times. And let us say, Amen. The thoughts of we who are gathered here today are filled with recollections of Bernice Cohen. We are bound together by a bond of common sorrow. Our tears join us on the sad occasion of her death. I begin by sharing a brief letter that was written by Bernice's cousin in Israel. His cousin Rita Aloni was born in Europe. She was smuggled out of Europe, and although their stories were so very different, she and Bernice were truly kindred spirits. They loved each other very much, and this is what she wrote. My dear friend Bernice, you have been much more than a friend to me. You have been like the elder sister I never had. Whenever we met, we had long conversations about life, about career and motherhood, about being a daughter to an aging mother, the meaning of being a spouse in our days. There was the difference of culture and of age between us, and yet we shared the curiosity of looking at the phenomena of life and trying to understand them. We met the first time as grown-ups in my parents' home in Jerusalem. You a mother of 4 and me just married. Our husbands immediately clicked together. 2 pilots with experience of war. One in the Second World War in the U.S. Air Force, the other in the Six-Day War in the Israeli Air Force. Both of them are not with us anymore, and now you have joined them. Be tranquil, my friend. I will always remember you and think about you as I have done in the last couple of years. Rita from Israel. We are also honored today to have with us the Chancellor and Vice Chancellor of the Jewish Theological Seminary as an expression of their enormous love and respect for Bernice. Chancellor Arnie Eisen, Vice Chancellor Bonnie Epstein. Bonnie also proudly a member of our congregation. And I would now like to call forward Chancellor Eisen to share a few words.
I want to thank the family for allowing me to speak today in memory of Bernice. Bernice Cohen was one of the first supporters of JTS whom I got to know after being named Chancellor-elect of JTS in 2006. She was one of the first to give me frank and direct advice, a practice that never changed, and one of the first who made me happy and proud that I had taken the job of Chancellor. That too never changed. A job that involved meetings with Bernice Cohen was work to be treasured. I would visit Bernice regularly in her office near the back door at Temple Beth Shalom, where she would be sure to have tea and cookies ready for me, along with the lowdown on what was happening at TBS and among conservative Jews on Long Island. That news was usually interspersed with learned opinion about shuls in general, rabbis in general, and the direction of JTS. I loved these tete-a-tetes, as Bernice well knew. The tea was Lipton, the cookies were not always the best, but the person behind the desk was Bernice Cohen, and she was the best. I also enjoyed seeing Bernice around the table at JTS board meetings, a seat that her husband Albert had occupied before her. I knew that prior to the meeting, or just after it, without fail, Bernice would let me know what she really thought about the matters under discussion and what was worrying her about what I was doing or what the board wanted me to do. It was clear that the men at the table did not intimidate her. I'm not sure anyone did. Bernice was never shy with advice, but with me at least, she was always tactful as well as smart. She took a wry approach to people and events, never disrespectful, but not uncritical either. Her Brooklyn accent was a piece with the common sense wisdom she dispensed. I did not always follow Bernice's advice, but I appreciated the advantage of having her give it. You wanted Bernice at your side and on your side. Management consultants teach that the actual structure of an organization is not necessarily the one that appears in the org chart. There are people who play a role in the formal structure of the institution, and there are those who actually make the place work. I'm not sure what the consultants would do with Bernice's post as volunteer executive director of Temple Beth Shalom, let alone the fact that Bernice held that post for 25 years. Rabbi Lucas and others can speak to that aspect of Bernice's service to this community far better than I can. But I do want to testify to the pride Bernice expressed about the synagogue, its members, and its clergy, part and parcel of the pride she felt in being a Jew, a conservative Jew, a leader, and the trustee of JTS. All of these, I believe, were wrapped up in Bernice's boundless love for her family, which she expressed every single time I saw her. I'm going to miss lots of things about Bernice Cohen, but I think what I will miss most is this kind of positivity she exhibited. The pleasure of being around a person who knew who she was and was comfortable with it, knew what she stood for, and always stood her ground, and did not put on airs because she never needed to. Bernice Cohen was just fine as she was. I only wish there were more Jews like her, and that we could have had the pleasure of her company for more years than we did. On behalf of my colleagues at JTS, and on behalf of the Board of Trustees on which Bernice served, I extend consolation to her family and friends and the entire Temple Beth Shalom community. May her memory be for blessing.
Thank you, Chancellor Eisen. Where do we find the words? Where do we find the right words to express our loss? A eulogy is not the time for creative writing. It's the time for truth. This moment demands nothing less than the truth. And it's for this reason that Talmud insists that we each write our own eulogy. Not with pen or in ink, of course, but we write our eulogies with our lives. We write it through our relationships. We write it through our activities. We write it through what we come to represent in the community and in the lives of those whose life crosses ours. We each carry our own memory of Bernice Cohen, and by sharing some of these thoughts today, by weaving them together with our own recollections, we hope to pay proper tribute to the memory of a life that has come to its close. I have to confess, I'm a little bit nervous today. Although I've been a rabbi for almost 40 years now, and I've done my share of funerals and too many eulogies, I have to confess a certain sense of nervousness because I feel as if Bernice is listening. And I am concerned that on a subject that is near and dear to her like few others, I might not measure up to the task at hand. Bernice had high standards for herself and for others. There was no such thing as good enough. If it was worth doing, it was worth doing right. Bernice, I ask for your forgiveness and understanding, something you never withheld from any of us during your life, so I'm confident you will not withhold it now. We sit here today in the midst of our celebration of Passover, one of the most beloved holidays, and one of the most beloved symbols of this holiday is the charoset. It's that concoction of nuts and wine and apples that was on our Seder plate, and it's supposed to represent the mortar, the cement that our ancestors used to make bricks during their forced slavery, during their years of hardship to Pharaoh in Egypt. And I never quite understood the charoset. Because on the one hand, it's a symbol of something bad, something harsh and bitter. And yet, it's one of the sweetest, most enjoyable things that we eat at the Passover Seder. It's a contradiction. It's one that I've never quite understood. How can something be sad and sweet and tough and happy at the same time? But all of us who loved Bernice knew exactly how something could be both harsh and sweet, tough but loving. There's so much that I want to say, so much that needs to be said. Bernice's children have asked me to speak for them, and I hope I have captured the extent of their love and commitment to their mother and to the woman who literally gave you life. Bernice was born in Brooklyn. She was one of 3 girls. Her sister Ethel survives her and mourns with us here today. Their father owned a deli, and Bernice and her sisters all worked in that deli. Her first language was Yiddish, and she only learned to speak English when she went to public school. But her father was enormously proud that all 3 of his girls went to college. Bernice was a talented young woman. She went to the High School of Music and Art, and she was an accomplished violinist. And even after she stopped playing, there was always a violin in the house. Violin was passed on to Stephen, who, while not quite as passionate about it as his mother was, does acknowledge that by playing in the Roslyn School Orchestra, he met Laura, who was also in the orchestra. So Mom's insistence was not for naught. But there's no doubt that Bernice's real artistic passion was manifest in Marla's talent and artistry, of which your mom was so incredibly proud. She never tired of showing us and sharing with us your creations. Bernice applied for a teacher's certificate at a time when they were no longer giving certification to women. You know how this story's going to end. You tell me if this next part does not sound vintage Bernice and a harbinger of things to come. Bernice refused to take no for an answer. She felt this was unfair and unjust, and she challenged the ruling before the New York School Board, and she won. This would be the first in a long line of individuals and organizations who would learn that Bernice could and would be a formidable and passionate advocate for any cause that she believed in. Now, despite her artistic talents, Bernice was actually a chemistry major, and soon after she graduated, she worked on the Manhattan Project, sometimes carrying uranium in taxi cabs from place to place around Manhattan, although it's not clear if she understood what she was carrying at the time. Her career ended when they wanted her to move with the rest of the project to Oak Ridge, Tennessee. And her father put his foot down, stating that Tennessee was no place for a single Jewish girl to live in a tent surrounded by single men. During the war, Bernice coordinated a pen pal program with letters from Brooklyn to soldiers overseas. And in fact, it was as part of this project that she met Al, who was flying B-17s during the war, and they met at one point when he was back in the States. Family legend has it that Bernice's father and mother were not all that thrilled with Al. They saw him as a boy with few prospects, and when Bernice ended a relationship with a doctor, no less, one that she was engaged to in order to be with Al, well, her parents made it clear that this was not what they had expected and not what they approved of. They thought she was making a mistake. But even her parents would have to learn that Bernice was relentless when it came to doing what she thought was right. As Stephen remembers it, Bernice's mother did not smile throughout their wedding. In fact, according to Bernice, she never smiled in Al's presence until they started giving her grandchildren. But as usual, Bernice clearly knew what she was doing. And not only did the two of them form a remarkable partnership that would last until his death in 1999, but Al proved he was quite the catch and one of the most accomplished people that I think most of us have ever met. I remember Al telling me the story of how a few years after they were married, one of the most fulfilling moments in his life came when Bernice's father mentioned out loud that he needed some money for a project. Al was just starting out in his firm at the time, but he jumped at the opportunity. Dad, if you need money, let me help. You can help me? Absolutely, it would be my pleasure. Then he laughed and told me how he had to go to his partners and beg for an advance, but he was intent on proving that he could take care of their daughter. I think most of us can agree that he did okay when it came to taking care of their daughter. Bernice and Al Cohen are two of the most generous people that I have ever met. The stories of their generosity are legendary, and I could easily fill the rest of this day recounting them and still have not exhausted the list. And key to all of them is that they gave generously and they gave without fanfare, with no demand for recognition. They gave because they wanted to, and they gave because they could. That young man without prospects did okay for himself. And Bernice and Al were glad to be able to share of their good fortune. There are so many members of this family, nieces and nephews and cousins, who will all tell you their version of a story of how Bernice and Al helped them in a time of illness or put one or another of them through college. But it's not only family. There are strangers who can tell those same stories. I remember the first time that I was sitting here at Beth Shalom at our advanced gifts dinner for the Jewish Theological Seminary. In those days, it was still the custom that people would stand up and announce their gifts, the theory being that others would emulate them and also aspire to giving generous gifts. I remember at this dinner, Bernice standing up and announcing what to my ears was an astounding annual gift. And I remember leading over to the seminary field worker and remarking, wow, that is amazing. And she responded, well, actually, they gave twice as much as that, but Bernice was embarrassed to admit publicly how much they gave, so she only announces half her gift. It was classic Al and Bernice. Or there was the time that I made a presentation to the board here at TBS that it was time for us to buy a new Siddur for the congregation. And the next day, Bernice called me into her office and said that she went home and told Al about my presentation, and they decided that they want to buy the books for the congregation. When I suggested that we at least put a plate in the front of all the books acknowledging their gift, she refused and said it was enough that they were able to make it happen. Al and Bernice loved synagogues. Before they moved to Roslyn, Al had been president of the Franklin Square Jewish Center, and Franklin Square's loss was definitely Roslyn's gain. They moved here in 1958 and immediately became active in our shul, although Ruth Kahn, may she rest in peace, used to like to make sure that I knew that the shul was founded in 1951, so Bernice and Al were not founding members. But if they were not founding members, they were everything but that. Bernice served as president of our sisterhood, and then as the first woman president of our shul, and then for 25 years as executive director, where although she was here day and night, 7 days a week, she worked for $1 a year. And then as long as she was able, after that, as our director of Temple Beth Shalom's endowment. Some of our most generous members, some sitting here today, will tell you what it was like during the Bernice years to get a phone call from Bernice Cohen. She never asked for money, they will tell you. She would inform them of a particular emergency or problem or challenge, and then she would say, Al and I are doing such and such, and I'd like you to do the same. They led by example. And by the way, they'll also tell you that it was impossible to say no to Bernice. I can't tell you how many times we confronted one financial problem or another, and then I would ask Bernice how we're going to handle this one, and she would say something to the effect of, well, it's been taken care of. And I always knew what it's been taken care of meant. And in some cases, she solved issues even before our leadership knew there was an issue. Of course, it's hard to speak about Bernice and her involvement in the temple, which was the center of her life and her passion, without speaking of that famous Simchat Torah that now has become part of our history and is a story that is told with reverence and respect by generations of TBS members. As the story is told, Rabbi Sternstein, alav shalom, without discussion or forethought, Robert thinks he had one too many l'chaims, that Simchat Torah. But Rabbi Sternstein took a Torah, handed it to Bernice, and told her to lead the Hakafah. And she tried to refuse, but he insisted that she take it and lead the Hakafah around the sanctuary. Bernice described how she was literally shaking when she took the Torah, knowing that she was doing something that had never been done by a woman before. And it became a defining moment for this temple, and one that was not without controversy, as a group walked out in protest and founded the Roslyn Synagogue as a result of that bold act. So one could say that Bernice is not only responsible for our shul, but for the founding of the Roslyn Synagogue as well. You're welcome very much. When we hired our first female assistant rabbi, I remember the pride with which Bernice embraced that decision, feeling that in some small way she had led the way for what is, in my humble opinion, the single greatest achievement of conservative Judaism, the empowerment and engagement of 50% of our population that was heretofore religiously unengaged and not empowered. Now, please don't get the idea that Bernice was all sugar and spice and everything nice. Bernice could be a tough cookie, and you did not want to be on the other side of any disagreement, a position I frequently occupied. But the one thing I never doubted in my many disagreements with her is that it was never about Bernice. Bernice only cared for what she thought was the best for the shul. And once she decided something was the best for the shul, she fought for it with determination and persistence. And that's why no matter how frustrated you might get, you had to love her. She was relentless in her pursuit of what she thought was our best interest. I remember when I first came here 22 years ago, I worried that Bernice might not take well to this new rabbi, especially after Rabbi Sternstein had been such a respected and formidable presence for 25 years. But Bernice became my biggest fan, my number one supporter, because she only cared for what was best for the shul. And once she decided I was good for the shul, I was home free. Like the charoset at our Seder tables, Bernice managed to be both tough and sweet at the very same time. It was really remarkable. Malka Mezahav, our beloved school principal for so many years, who worked so closely with Bernice, wrote, Bernice was a powerhouse. She was funny, demanding, generous, impatient, and especially did not tolerate fools. She shared the story of how one day Bernice decided that Malka's office was too small. The next day, the office that was connected to hers was demolished, and the two became one, and Malka's office was actually larger than Rabbi Sternstein's. When Malka said she was not comfortable with the fact that her office was bigger than the rabbi's, Bernice snapped back, "What's the problem? You need a bigger office because the school is the most important part of the temple." Malka went on to add that Bernice loved children as long as they were not too noisy, and said what so many of us feel: "I loved her with all my heart. Let her memory be for a blessing." It's like the charoset, sweet and tough at the same time. In a shul that did not have reserved seats on the high holidays, a custom we still follow to this day, Bernice insisted that a row or two be reserved for her. She might work for $1 a year, but there had to be some perks. And yet at the same time, she was exercising a bit of privilege. At the very same time, she insisted that any newly widowed woman would sit with her in her row that year, as she wanted them to know that there was a place reserved for them in our shul, precisely at a time when they were feeling alone and isolated. Bernice hated computers. She had no use for those newfangled things. And long after our office had computerized, she refused to have one on her desk. And in fact, she insisted on keeping a separate set of books where she continued to make handwritten entries. She just did not trust those computers. Bernice was, well, shall we say, frugal? For the shul and other causes like the Jewish Theological Seminary and North Shore University Hospital, she could be generous to a fault. But when it came to herself, she needed nothing and required little. That same Bernice, who willingly paid for the purchase of prayer books for the entire congregation, could also be found in her office taping up the bindings of a prayer book that was well beyond repair. "I think it's time to bury these books, Bernice." "Why? These are perfectly good books," she would insist. And she called her bookbinding her therapy. Bernice loved to garden and insisted that her house and the synagogue have only the finest when it came to plantings. And when it came time for us, at one point we wanted to honor Bernice. No matter what we suggested as an honorific that we wanted to do in her name, she refused. She rejected it. The only thing that she relented and permitted us to do is to plant the beautiful tree that's right outside our portico. When you go out today, it's right on the left. You'll see it right now. It's blossoming with the beautiful white leaves. It looks like a cherry tree, but I don't think it is a cherry tree. It's right there. And she let us put a bench there. You'll see the bench as well with an inscription. A place of beauty and tranquility. That is what appealed to Bernice. Bernice was a classy and a dignified lady, so much so that when she began to fail, she got angry when we came to visit her at the Bristol. She didn't want us to see her that way, at anything less than her best. She had too much pride to accept what was happening to her. She was proud of you, her children. She was proud of your accomplishments. And she was proud of you, her grandchildren, and her 6 great-grandchildren. There is so much more that could be said, so much more that should be said. Had Bernice and Al been members of our congregation and not had been as generous as they were over the years, dayenu, it would have been enough for us. Had she been so generous but not served in all her leadership capacities, sisterhood president, synagogue president, executive director, endowment director, dayenu, would have been enough for us. Had she served in all those positions but not been caring and concerned friend of so many of us, dayenu. Had she been a caring and concerned friend and a loving mother and grandmother and sister, dayenu. Al achat kama v'chama, how manifold are God's blessings, that we were privileged to know, one, as special as Bernice Cohen to be a part of her life and to have her be a part of our lives. Death ends life, but it does not end a relationship. Our relationship with Bernice continues beyond her death because of the intensity with which she lived. Just as Pesach is a story we return to year after year to keep it alive in our hearts, her story is now our story. You, her children and her grandchildren, you will continue her story in your lives and your commitments. And we here at Temple Beth Shalom will continue her story in our lives and in our commitments to always be the kind of shul that would make Bernice proud. In fact, if you will permit me one more request, time prohibited me from telling all the Bernice stories that I wanted to tell, and there are so many stories I'm sure I'm unaware of. Most of you have your own stories. So, what I would like to ask you to do is to send me your Bernice Cohen stories. Take a moment, write them down, send them to me. We'll collect them all, we'll print them up, we'll share them with her family. I'll give them to Judy Goldberg. We'll make them part of our archives. In fact, I'm going to speak to our leadership. Maybe we'll even have a Friday night where over Shabbat dinner, we will invite our community, her family, to join us as we'll sit around the table and share our stories and share our memories of a life that was so well lived. A life that made a difference in our lives. A woman who left the world better than she found it. Her life ends, but her message continues. Her example survives. Her influence endures. O God, let us bring thy children out of the darkness and the shadow of death. We thank thee for the life of Bernice Cohen, in whose friendship we were blessed, by whose understanding we were guided, and in whose tenderness we were healed. May the sureness of her nearness to us banish loneliness from our hearts, and the sureness of her nearness to thee, O God, quiet our anxious spirit. Be with those who most poignantly and most painfully feel the pangs of this hour, with her sister Ethel and Gerald, with her children Jeffrey and Shelley, Stephen and Laura, Robert, Sharon, Marla and Jim, with her grandchildren Rachel and Jason, Jordana and Jordy, Bradley, Jennifer and Eli, Emily and Jean, Daniel, Joseph, Anna and Benji, and Michael, with her 6 great-grandchildren, with all the family and friends. Comfort and strengthen their hearts, guide and direct their lives, help them to know that deeper than the pains, the frustration, and even the mystery of death are your everlasting arms of love and mercy. Grant them steadfastness of purpose, faith in thee, and courage to face life. Give them the wisdom to say with understanding the ancient words of submission and resignation, perhaps the wisest words that could be said at an hour such as this. Adonai natan b'Adonai lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai mevarach. Lord, you have given, and now you have called unto yourself. We praise thee, O God, for the courage to make our broken hearts an altar before which we may acknowledge thy sovereignty and love. May thy name be praised now and forevermore. And let us say, Amen. Because it is, we are in the midst of the holiday of Passover, the traditional El Mole is not recited, but I invite you to please rise as the cantor will lead us in the substitute memorial prayer.
Eloham slichot, Chanun verachum, rechapayim verav chesed, Hametzei kaparat pesha, והקרבת ישב, ומנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה. במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע מסיירים את נשמת ברכה בת יוסף וגיטל שהלכה לעולמה. ענה בעל הרחמים זכרה לה לטובה כל זכויותיה וצדקותיה בארצות החיים ופתח לשער צדק ויורה שערי חמלה וחנינה בסתר כנפיך אסתיריה לעולמים וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתה אדוני הוא נחלתה ותנוח בשלום על משכבה ונאמר
O God, exalted and full of compassion, grant perfect peace in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure. To the soul of Bracha Bat Yosef Gittel, to the soul of Bernice Cohen, who is gone to her eternal home. Master of mercy, we beseech you, remember all the worthy and the righteous deeds that she performed in the land of the living. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. The Lord is her portion. May she now rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. I'd like to take this opportunity to also acknowledge the presence of Rabbi Ian and Sori Jackness. Rabbi Jackness grew up in this congregation, and you were a source of pride to Bernice for your accomplishments. Interment will be immediately following at the Temple Beth Shalom section at the Beth Moses Cemetery. Following which, because it is Passover, Shiva is deferred. There is no formal Shiva for the balance of the holiday. So the children are going to be returning to their respective homes, and you can contact them if you're interested in expressing your sympathies. At this time, as is our custom here at Temple Beth Shalom, I would like to invite the past presidents of our congregation to please come forward to serve as an honor guard to escort the casket from the temple.